Hey everybody, this is the Marine. You got a hammock and now you want to take it camping or even on a backpacking trip. Now it's time to start thinking about getting a tarp. Or you may even have a tarp that's not working well for you and you just want to upgrade. In this episode of Things to Know When Buying a Tarp, we're going to look at the different styles, the different types of material or fabrics, and also which size tarp would work best for you. When purchasing a tarp, you first have to consider what you're going to use it for. You may be an ultralight hiker where your main concern is getting the least amount of weight and bulk as possible, or you may just be a backpacker where half the time is on the trail, the other half is at camp, or you may just want to use it for camping where you're going to spend the whole day around camp doing activities around camp. Each one of these will determine which tarp you will need. Now there's basically 5 different styles of tarps. The first one is asymmetrical, which is an ASYM tarp. Then we have a square tarp that makes a diamond shape. Then we have the hexagon, which is called the hex tarp. Then a rectangle tarp. And then last, the winter tarp. And we're going to look at the pros and cons to find which one would work well for you for the activity you're going to use it for. Most ASYM tarps are sewn in a parallelogram to mirror a diagonal lay in a hammock. Also, large ponchos are used as an asymmetric tarp. An ASYM tarp are only sufficient in moderate rainstorms. Otherwise, they do not provide the best protection, especially in blowing rain. The pros are they are fast to set up with only 2 tie-out points. They are lightweight and small to pack. This tarp would work well for an ultralight hiker as long as they know they're not going to be in a heavy rainstorm. The next tarp is a diamond shape. They're just a square tarp pitched corner to corner to make a diamond shape, and they have fair to good protection depending on the size. A basic 9 by 9 feet or 2.7 by 2.7 meter tarp creates a ridgeline or a length of more than 12.5 feet or a little over 3 meters. Plenty of room for most hammocks. Like the ASYM tarp, the diamond shape works well except for in sideway downpours. The side panels can be long and unusable, and the straight edges are difficult to keep taut. They require a little more setup skills, and that's because of the many pitching options, which I think is a pro. And like the ASYM tarps, they're fast to set up because you only have 2 guidelines. Now another negative with the ASYM and the diamond shaped tarp, because there's not a lot of material to protect you, you have to pitch them low. Now the hexagonal or the hex tarp is the most common option used for ultralight hikers, backpackers, and they also can be used for campers. Hex tarp typically have a catenary cut edges that create a taut pitch and eliminates material flapping in the wind. And they're very good for protecting you from the bad rainstorms. Depending on the size, they can be fairly lightweight and packable. Depending on the material, lightweight can become extremely lightweight, but very expensive. Rectangular tarp often gets a bad rap, and that's because they're just so plain ordinary, but they have a lot going for them. Like the square diamond shaped tarp, they have many pitching options, and they can be converted into an ASYM tarp, but with full side protection. These wide tarps can be pitched low to the ground for maximum privacy and protection from the terrible storms, but the straight edges are difficult to keep taut in the windy conditions. Because of its shape means more material, which makes it heavier and bulkier than the other 3. Now the next tarp is a 4-season or winter tarp, and they provide the best protection from any type of weather that Mother Nature can throw at you. They're basically built off a hex tarp with doors added. Winter tarps are much wider than any other tarp styles, so that the sides can be pitched low, eliminating drafts and ground splashes. These tarps usually have side panel pulls to create a roomy interior. On this side you have a lot more room, and this side is closer to the hammock. And to strengthen the tarp when there's strong wind gusts. They provide the best privacy for changing clothes when the doors are used. They do require more guide points and setup time, and depending on the fabrics, they can be heavy, bulky, and a little more expensive, but they could be well worth it depending on the type of camping you do. In this segment, we're going to look at the different materials and fabrics that are used to make a tarp. Each has its trade-off for weight, durability, bulk, and cost. And each has its strengths and weaknesses depending on what you want to use it for. We're going to first start looking at the material that works well for the camper, work our way up to the backpacker, the ultralight hiker, and of course it's going to be the cheapest to the most expensive. Now the first material fabric is waterproof polyester, also known as a poly tarp. These work great for someone that just wants to try hammock camping for the first time, or someone that is going to use it for car camping where they're not going to be carrying it too far. And the reason why is because they're so cheap, and you can find them in most department stores or hardware stores. In most cases, you can find them for under $10 in the United States, and I'm sure in other countries they're very cheap and easy to find. A tarp that is 12 by 10 feet or 3.6 by 3 meters are common and is a great size to put over a hammock to provide exceptional protection. They do not stretch when wet, and they are very strong from abrasion. However, they're heavy and very bulky, and they don't work well for backpackers, especially ultralight hikers. But you could strap them on the bottom of your pack if you're not going to travel so far. The next fabric is a silicone impregnated nylon called Sil Nylon. Sil Nylon seems to be the most popular fabric today. They're lightweight, they're waterproof, and they work well for ultralight hikers and backpackers. However, it's not breathable and stretches when it gets wet. You have to keep tightening it periodically so that it won't sag too much. Another fabric somewhat like Sil Nylon is Sil Poly. Sil Poly is made of silicone coated polyester. Although polyester is less stretchy, it's heavier and not as durable as nylon, but it is more waterproof. Nylon, however, is hydrophilic, meaning that it absorbs water over time. Poly is the best choice for a higher waterproof rating, but if that's not an issue, Sil Nylon is stronger, lighter, but stretchier. The next fabric is Dyneema, previously known as Cuban fiber or Cuban fiber. This fabric is extremely lightweight. In most cases, half the weight of Sil Nylon, but they could cost 2, 3, 4 times more than Sil Nylon. They don't stretch when they're wet, so you don't have to worry about a saggy tarp, especially in high winds. Theoretically, they're 100% waterproof, and they don't absorb water like nylon. When you're ready to pack up, you shake that tarp and the water will just fly off. And so you don't have to worry about carrying that extra weight of moisture. Now, Dyneema is a very strong fabric, but it's prone to abrasion. So it's wise to carry a piece of Dyneema tape for repairs. And they're also a little more bulky than Sil Nylon and Sil Poly. This material is the ultimate choice for the ultralight hiker, if they can afford it. Now, after deciding the style and the fabric, now it's time to decide which size tarp you're going to need. It's very important to ensure that your tarp extends between 6 to 12 inches or 15 to 30 centimeters or more over each end of your hammock. When considering which length of tarp for your hammock, you have to remember that a hammock sags when properly hung at a 30-degree angle. So that means that a 10-foot long hammock will have a peak-to-peak length of just over 8 feet or 2.4 meters. An 11-foot hammock would have a peak-to-peak length of 9 feet, which is 2.7 meters, which would give you plenty of room on each end of the hammock with an 11-foot tarp. And the next thing is the width. And of course, the longer and the wider the tarp, the more protection and comfort you're going to have. And I'm a big tarp guy, but the trade-off is because of the more material, the heavier and bulkier they'll be. Now for the ultralight hikers, if they have a hammock that's 10 feet long, then they'd want a tarp that's 10 feet in length, and then they also would want the width around 8.6 feet, which is 2.6 meters. Now a good tarp for the backpacker, like the ultralight hikers, if you have a hammock that's 10 feet in length, then you want the tarp at 10 feet in length. If you have an 11-foot hammock, you want an 11-foot tarp. But the width for the backpacker now, a good size would be 9.6 feet, which is 2.9 meters. And now for the campers. If you have a 10-foot hammock, I would get an 11-foot tarp. If you have an 11-foot hammock, I'd get a 12-foot tarp. And the width, I'd get a 10 feet or more. And that's because you're not carrying the extra weight or bulk in, so you might as well have the maximum comfort and protection. Now these are just suggestions that I believe that would work well for you. It's all about personal preference, and I also believe in improvising. Now another option when buying a tarp is color. And there's a wide range of different colors. And if you're worried about wild animals or you plan on doing a lot of stealth camping, then you should consider buying a neutral color or a camouflage tarp. Animals like people are very curious. A light or a bright tarp will stick out like a sore thumb. But if you have a neutral, especially a camouflage tarp, in most cases the animals and people will walk on by without even noticing. Now that you picked out that perfect tarp, now you have to decide how you're going to hang it. And the cordage that you use is called a ridgeline. And most tarp ridgelines fall under two types. The first one is the end-only ridgeline. There are two separate cordage that wraps around a tree and is connected to one end of the tarp, and then wrapped around the other tree and attached to the other end of the tarp. The second one is a continuous ridgeline that runs through the length of the tarp. It can be strung up above or below the tarp. Now, a lot of people like to use paracord for the ridgeline. My favorite cordage is a Dyneema fabric called Zinget or Latchet. For the diameter size, it is the strongest, which would also make it the lightest. And it doesn't stretch, it's waterproof, and it has one of the longest lifespans. Now, if you want either of these two ridgelines with gadgets to make it easier and faster to set up, cottage companies like Dutchware Gear will sell these in a package ready to go. Otherwise, you have to use knots, which will require a little skilled know-how. And you're also going to need more cordage to tie down your tarp, and these are called guidelines. There's basically 4 tie-down points, and some will have a D-ring in the middle, and you may also have panel pull-outs or doors, so you may need to get more cordage, and the average guideline is about 6 feet. Then you may need stakes to attach to the guidelines. Over the years, I've used many different styles and types of stakes, and my favorite are the MSR mini groundhogs, and they're only a couple bucks. Otherwise, you can use a rock, a tree branch, or just tie it directly to some type of vegetation. Now, there's 2 more things I'd like to talk to you about that I highly recommend. And the first one is a double-end stuff sack. A double-end stuff sack makes it easier to deploy and to put away your tarp. The next one is a snakeskin. The snakeskin are made out of either Dyneema, nylon, but the best is a mesh material which dries quicker. And what it basically does is hold the tarp above you so you can view the sky or the stars at nighttime, and if it rains, you can easily, quickly deploy it. I'm sleeping, all of a sudden I wake up and it's raining out. And the weatherman's wrong again. So I need to get this tarp deployed as fast as I can because I don't want anything to get wet, especially my dows. So what I'll do is get up, now the tarp is set up, everything underneath her is dry, now I can go back to sleep. Well, this concludes this video. The next video, we're going to look at how to set that tarp up. And if you have any questions or comments, please write them down below. I'd love to hear from you. This is the Marine. Thank you for watching, and God bless.